I love cats. They remind me of myself. They're precocious, independent, they have an insatiable bloodlust. We call them pets, but really they're just animals that let us touch them. Sometimes. I've had about 20 cats in my life, and what I have determined from that is they pretty much do exactly what they please when they please. And unfortunately, what they please tends to often be murdering small animals. And if you're an island chain with a set of extremely rare and endangered species, that's a very serious problem. So if you'll bear with me for a minute, I'd like to Jonathan Swift you a modest proposal. Yonaguni Island should murder all its cats. On the islands of Hawaii, they have a mongoose problem. It's not a natural problem, nor is it an accidental problem. In fact, you could kind of call it a mongoose solution, just not a very good one. In the 1800s, farmers brought the mongoose in the hopes that it would eradicate an invasive rat species that had stowed away aboard their ships and was now wreaking havoc on their sugarcane plantations. Only, instead of focusing on the rodents, which slept at a different time of day and were somewhat harder to catch, it almost immediately turned on the local birds. And the only reason I know that is because when I used to work on a farm on Big Island, I was instructed to trap and kill at least one mongoose every single day. I have no idea the legality of that, by the way, but it was something I was forced to do, so I did it. And those little bastards do not die easy. I will never forget the image of those thrashing, angry little bodies drowning violently in a bucket. And if that sounds bad to you, imagine having to do it before breakfast every morning. It was unpleasant. But it's what had to be done. People made a mistake, and whether it ruined men's breakfasts or not, somebody had to do the killing. But Hawaiians are not the only ones who have a mongoose problem. Here in the islands of Okinawa, they've made that exact same mistake. Actually, it was a worse mistake because it came a full generation after the failure of Hawaii. And even with that lesson, on their own island chain no less, they still made the exact same mistake again in the 1970s, 60 years later. Nobody could pretend they didn't know what they were doing. They were so intent on killing the local venomous snake, a famous island boogeyman known as the habu, that they were willing to look the other way even after it was abundantly clear what was going to happen. Yet again, just as with the rats in Hawaii, the difference between the nocturnal life of the habu and the diurnal life of the mongoose meant that they were effectively useless in their task. What they weren't useless at, you probably won't be surprised to hear, was killing just about everything else. The mongoose has to die. At least if the native animals of Okinawa are going to last that much longer. Few people are pushing for the rights of the mongoose. After all, they aren't our pets. We don't really like them. Anyone who's ever held a mongoose in their hands once is not going to do it a second time. They're biters. But that said, those same people would likely not be pushing for the eradication of a far more devastating and far more widespread invasive species: house cats. Because no matter how many animals they drive to the brink of extinction, there's not that many people who want to publicly support the murder of cats. Except me, I guess. Because humans love cats. They're our pets. We domesticated them, and in many instances we consider them members of our family. Sure, they may drag home a bird every now and again, but that's just our little babies being cheeky. They brought it as a gift, and how are we going to say no to that cute little face pawing at the door? To put it simply, we won't. And because of that, the numbers of this invasive species are absolutely staggering. For every mongoose that the Japanese brought to these islands, they've introduced thousands upon thousands of cats. They're unquestionably among the worst and most destructive invasive species on Earth today, and it's entirely our fault. There's almost no place humans reside on this planet that we haven't brought them along. In the United States, where data collection is most reliable, they lose up to 3 billion birds a year to house cats. Even when they're microchipped and spayed and controlled as much as any other animal, they're still the #1 killer. Stray and domestic alike, they're devastating the ecosystem, and there's no reason to suspect it's any different anywhere else. The data simply isn't being collected there. But here in the Okinawan Yaeyama Islands, stray and feral cats are almost everywhere you look. They litter the towns and the forests, they're in the garbage piles and in the harbors. You can't go anywhere without stumbling across a cute meowing little kitty. And in turn, those adorable little psychopaths have almost completely annihilated the island chain's bird population. Isolated islands with dozens of creatures found nowhere else on Earth quickly being wiped away. Species that have spent hundreds of thousands of years adapting to their unique lands are facing extinction from an animal that has essentially only been here for the last 40. An animal we will likely never keep in check. Because after all, we love them. Nobody in their right mind would deny that environmentalism and conservation are much trickier in practice than we want them to be. For all of my maligning of our mongoose enemies and feline friends, the reality is that the worst invasive species is us. We brought the rats, we brought the mongooses, we brought the cats and the dogs and all the other things destroying the local flora and fauna. But we're also the ones who can stop it. Even though we created this problem, I don't think anybody would deny at this point that we're also the only thing that can solve it. So the question isn't if we're dedicated to sustaining life, it's which life we're here to sustain. It's easy to understand why we have to drown the mongoose, even if it feels terrible to do so, because they don't have a value to us. They failed in their task, but it's a much harder sell to kill all our pets. Because from our perspective, cats are here to entertain us, and they do a great job of it. Their wanton destruction of the environment is merely a consequence of that value, a side effect that we overlook to get what we want. Virtually every study ever undertaken in the Yaeyama Islands has shown a decrease across the board in virtually all of their endemic species. It isn't just a generic loss due to the changing of our climate, it isn't just habitat destruction, it's cats. And while on the mainland there's likely no way to reverse the damage and round up every animal, on these small islands it's still a possibility. Here it could happen. And while it may not change much in world terms, it would be symbolic. Because at the very least it would show we're capable of trying, that we're willing to do what it takes to better manage our world. We can hate it all we want, but the reality is that if we don't step up and view the cute animals the same way we view the vicious ones, the problem is only going to get worse. If we don't take action to stop treating the world as our personal petting zoo, it's eventually going to become all pet and no zoo. If we want to be true environmentalists and save the world from ourselves, we're going to have to learn to police our own desires, and that includes our desire for love. So here's my modest proposal. We kill all the cats. Oh, come on, buddy. We treat them like the mongoose. We look them right in their adorable little eyes, and we kill them. And if you agree with that, stay the hell away from my house, because you're sure as shit not getting mine. This is Rare Earth. Oh my God, the wind blew him closer. He's like 4 feet. Oh man, that is terrifying. That spider is terrifying. Oh, I don't even like looking at him. I've honestly never been more afraid of anything than this proximity to this thing. I want to hit it with a rock, but
might come for you.
God knows what it's gonna do, you know?